First of all, I want to greet a good day to you, Mr. Lemuel Regis. Now I present to you my video report. Existentialism is a term applied to the work of certain late 19th and 20th century philosophers who, despite profound doctrinal differences, shared the belief that philosophical thinking begins with the human subject, not merely the thinking subject, but the acting, feeling, living human individual. In existentialism, the individual starting point is characterized by what has been called the existential attitude, or a sense of disorientation and confusion in the face of an apparently meaningless or absurd world. Many existentialists have also regarded traditional systematic or academic philosophies, in both style and content, as too abstract and remote from concrete human experience. Søren Kierkegaard is generally considered to have been the first existentialist philosopher, though he did not use the term existentialism. He proposed that each individual, not society or religion, is solely responsible for giving meaning to life, and living it passionately and sincerely, authentically. Existentialism became popular in the years following World War II and strongly influenced many disciplines besides philosophy, including theology, drama, art, literature, and psychology. Kierkegaard, the single individual. Kierkegaard developed this problem in the context of his radical approach to Christian faith. Nietzsche did so in light of his thesis of the death of God. Subsequent existential thought reflects this difference. While some writers such as Sartre and Beauvoir were resolutely atheist in outlook, others such as Heidegger, Jaspers, Marcel, and Buber variously explored the implications of the concept authentic existence for religious consciousness. Though neither Nietzsche's nor Kierkegaard's thought can be reduced to a single strand, both took an interest in what Kierkegaard termed the single individual. Both were convinced that the singularity, what is most my own, me, could be meaningfully reflected upon while yet, precisely because of its singularity, remaining invisible to traditional philosophy, with its emphasis either on what follows enduring objective laws of nature, or else conforms to the universal standards of moral reason. A focus on existence thus led, in both, to unique textual strategies quite alien to the philosophy of their time and ours. In Kierkegaard, the singularity of existence comes to light at the moment of conflict between ethics and religious faith. Suppose it is my sense of doing God's will that makes my life meaningful. How does philosophy conceive this meaning? Drawing here on Hegel as emblematic of the entire tradition, Kierkegaard, in his book Fear and Trembling, argues that for philosophy my life becomes meaningful when I raise myself to the universal by bringing my immediate natural desires and inclinations under the moral law, which represents my telos, or what I ought to be. In doing so I lose my individuality, since the law holds for all, but my actions become meaningful in the sense of understandable, governed by norm. Now a person, whose sense of doing God's will is what gives her life meaning, will be intelligible just to the extent that her action conforms to the universal dictates of ethics. But what if, as in case of Abraham's sacrifice of his son, the action contradicts what ethics demands? Kierkegaard, http Plato Stanford Edu Entries. Existentialism notes HTML believes both that Abraham's life is supremely meaningful. It is not simply a matter of some immediate desire or meaningless tick that overcomes Abraham's ethical consciousness. On the contrary, doing the moral thing is itself in this case his tempting inclination, and that philosophy cannot understand it, thus condemning it in the name of ethics. God's command here cannot be seen as a law that would pertain to all. It addresses Abraham in his singularity. If Abraham's life is meaningful, it represents, from a philosophical point of view, the paradox that through faith the single individual is higher than the universal. Existence as a philosophical problem appears at this point. If there is a dimension to my being that is both meaningful and yet not governed by the rational standard of morality, by what standard is it governed? For unless there is some standard, it is idle to speak of meaning. Nietzschean nihilism. For Kierkegaard, existence emerges as a philosophical problem in the struggle to think the paradoxical presence of God. For Nietzsche, it is found in the reverberations of the phrase "God is dead," in the challenge of nihilism. Responding in part to the cultural situation in 19th century Europe, historical scholarship continuing to erode fundamentalist readings of the Bible, the growing cultural capital of the natural sciences, and Darwinism in particular, and in part driven by his own investigations into the psychology and history of moral concepts, Nietzsche sought to draw the consequences of the death of God, the collapse of any theistic support for morality. Like his contemporary, Fyodor Dostoevsky, whose character, Ivan, in The Brothers Karamazov, famously argues that if God does not exist then everything is permitted, Nietzsche's overriding concern is to find a way to take the measure of human life in the modern world. Unlike Dostoevsky, however, Nietzsche sees a complicity between morality and the Christian God that perpetuates a life-denying, and so ultimately nihilistic, stance. Nietzsche was not the first to decouple morality from its divine sanction. Psychological theories of the moral sentiments, developed since the 18th century, provided a purely human account of moral normativity. But while these earlier theories had been offered as justifications of the normative force of morality, Nietzsche's idea that behind moral prescriptions lies nothing but will to power undermined that authority. On the account given in On the Genealogy of Mortals, the Judeo-Christian moral order arose as an expression of the ressentiment of the weak against the power exercised over them by the strong. A tool used to thwart that power, it had over time become internalized in the form of conscience, creating a sick animal, whose will is at war with its own vital instincts. Thus Nietzsche arrived at Kierkegaard's idea that the crowd is untruth, the so-called autonomous, self-legislating individual is nothing but a herd animal that has trained itself to docility and unfreedom by conforming to the universal standards of morality. The normative is nothing but the normal. Heidegger, History as Claim. For Heidegger, to exist is to be historical. This does not mean that one simply finds oneself at a particular moment in history, conceived as a linear series of events. Rather, it means that selfhood has a peculiar temporal structure, that is the origin of that history, which subsequently comes to be narrated in terms of a series of events. Existential temporality is not a sequence of instants but instead a unified structure, in which the future, that is, the possibility aimed at in my project, recollects the past, that is, what no longer needs to be done, the completed so as to give meaning to the present, that is, the things that take on significance in light of what currently needs doing. To act, therefore, is, in Heidegger's terms, to historize Geschichte, to constitute something like a narrative unity, with beginning, middle, and end, that does not so much take place in time, as provides the condition for linear time. To exist between birth and death, then, is not merely to be present in each of a discrete series of temporal instants, but to constitute oneself in the unity of a history. An authentic existence is thus one, in which the projects that give shape to existence are ones to which I commit myself in light of this history. Though it belongs to and defines a moment, choice cannot be simply of the moment. To be authentic, I must understand my choice in light of the potential wholeness of my existence. Sartre, Existentialism and Marxism. A very different reading, and a very different recommendation, can be found in the work of Sartre. The basis for Sartre's reading of history, and his politics, was laid in that section of being and nothingness, that describes the birth of the social in the look of the other. In making me an object for his projects, the other alienates me from myself, displaces me from the subject position, the position from which the world is defined in its meaning and value, and constitutes me as something. Concretely, what I am constituted as is a function of the other's project and not something that I can make myself be. I am constituted as a Frenchman and through the hostility emanating from that German, I am constituted as a man in the resentment of that woman. I am constituted as a Jew on the basis of the other's anti-Semitism, and so on. This sets up a dimension of my being that I can neither control nor disavow, and my only recourse is to wrench myself away from the other in an attempt to restore myself to the subject position. For this reason, on Sartre's model, social reality is in perpetual conflict and Hegelian dialectic in which, for ontological reasons, no state of mutual recognition can ever be achieved. The we, the political subject, is always contested, conflicted, unstable. Existence precedes essence. Sartre's slogan "Existence precedes essence" may serve to introduce what is most distinctive of existentialism, namely, the idea that no general, non-formal account of what it means to be human can be given, since that meaning is decided in and through existing itself. Existence is self-making in a situation. Fackenheim 1961-37. In contrast to other entities, whose essential properties are fixed by the kind of entities they are, what is essential to a human being, what makes her who she is not fixed by her type, but by what she makes of herself, who she becomes. http Plato Stanford Edu Entries Existentialism Notes HTML The fundamental contribution of existential thought lies in the idea that one's identity is constituted neither by nature nor by culture, since to exist is precisely to constitute such an identity. It is in light of this idea that key existential notions such as staticity, transcendence, project, alienation, and authenticity must be understood. At first, it seems hard to understand how one can say much about existence as such. Traditionally, philosophers have connected the concept of existence with that of essence in such a way that the former signifies merely the instantiation of the latter. If essence designates what a thing is and existence that it is, it follows that what is intelligible about any given thing, what can be thought about it, will belong to its essence. It is from essence in this sense human being as rational animal or imago Dei, that ancient philosophy drew its prescriptions for an individual's way of life, its estimation of the meaning and value of existence. Having an essence meant that human beings could be placed within a larger whole, a cosmos, that provided the standard for human flourishing. Modern philosophy retained this framework even as it abandoned the idea of a natural place for man in the face of the scientific picture of an infinite, labyrinthine universe. In what looks like a proto-existential move, Descartes rejected the traditional essential definitions of man in favor of a radical, first-person reflection on his own existence, the I am. Nevertheless, he quickly reinstated the old model by characterizing his existence as that of a substance determined by an essential property, thinking. In contrast, Heidegger proposes that I am an entity, whose what essence is precisely to be and nothing but to be. Heidegger 1985, 110, 1962, 67. Such an entity's existing cannot, therefore, be thought as the instantiation of an essence, and consequently what it means to be such an entity cannot be determined by appeal to pre-given frameworks or systems, whether scientific, historical, or philosophical. I do exist because I have purpose in this world, and life is wonderful if we know how to live. By Kevin J. C. Acosta.